Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Jonas Holdeman, and this is Joe Barnhart.
And we want you to know that if you do or don't believe in a God, you are not alone, and you shouldn't be alone. Right here in East Tennessee, we can have rationalists discussing, and agnostics, believers, and so forth, discussing very important topics. This is a show for those of us who want to have good, open discussion. And so what are we going to have on today's show?
We're going to be starting our first part of dealing with neurotheology.
Neurotheology.
That is the neurological, biological basis for certain spiritual experience, personal spiritual experiences and behaviors.
But first, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsors. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is one sponsor and frequently has fun meetings and discussions tonight up at Barley's in the Old City. About starts around 5:30. Some of you probably already gathering there. Look for the silver jacket called the God Delusion standing up on the table. And the atheist experience will be discussed. Everyone is welcome to be there for this discussion. It's open-ended. All we ask is that you just participate in disagreement. It's good to disagree. We learn better that way.
Okay, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. Second Sunday, we hold the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday, we're mixing it up. Sometimes we have a get-together called Reflections meeting in someone's home. Features a potluck lunch, and sometimes we've started meeting to play board games and similar activities.
Okay, and the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular meetings. For example, we have book club meeting. It's going to be at one of the, what's the name of the place?
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble, and it's going to be. Yeah, and it's going to be one Sunday, and I can't remember what Sunday. Do you remember what Sunday it's going to be?
It's the second Sunday
of the month.
Of the month.
Yeah, and we're going to discuss this book, Zealot. It's a very well-known book now. It's so well-known it's on Amazon. And it's about a fellow who was a former Muslim who became a Christian and is looking into the historical question of who Jesus was historically. And it's an interesting book, and it's going to be discussed at this meeting. And so we'll have a get-together, and have other meetings at the Skeptics Book Club and the Open Book Club, and Sunday meetings. So we've got a lot of things going.
But we have a big event coming up that we want to tell everyone about.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is a invited lecture each year. The Rationalists of East Tennessee puts on a invited lecture open to the public. Everyone is invited and welcome. It's been held for as long as I know in the Goins Auditorium at Pellissippi
College.
And so let's see, the speaker is going to be Dr. Robert Price.
Oh, good. He's good, real good. And when is this? This
will be Sunday, May 18th, 2 p.m. The blurb associated with the flyers that you may see in your public library and other places.
Good. What time is it going to be? Sunday, May.
It will be Sunday, May 18th at 2 p.m. in the Goins Auditorium. It says here, non-theists are constantly accused of removing any basis for morality in society by rejecting God. But Robert M. Price combines the elements from Aquinas, Nietzsche, Durkheim, to outline a basis for humanist ethics, asking also whether the supposed need to derive morality from God is not actually fatal to theism.
So he's raising the question.
So the topic is ethics for humans and by humans.
And so look on our location for the rationalists of www.rationalists.org, and look at the information on this.
So we draw a lot of people, and the auditorium is often almost full.
Oh yeah,
and
was,
then afterwards there are refreshments.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So,
and so it's an enjoyable time to
it was full last time.
meet with the speaker and others that we don't get to see very often.
But he's a very good scholar and a very good speaker too. So
now we're kind of chuckling because Joe and I got here just seconds before the show started.
Yeah, they had a big problem on the highway that we hadn't anticipated.
We had a lane closure on the interstate, and
I hope we don't have a rain closure. That's more important. Okay.
So let's see. It says Dr. Price notes that
you
already
did
said
that, so we've done that. All right. So let's move on to the next point. And
okay. Yesterday.
May 5.
In just a moment, we have a phone call coming up. But yesterday, May 5th, was the 89th anniversary of the arrest of John Scopes in the 1925 on charges of teaching evolution.
Right here in East Tennessee.
Yeah.
Just down the road.
In that notorious Dayton. He was never actually detained. In July of that year, his trial became the first United States trial to be broadcast on the radio. The play Inherit the Wind was very loosely based on this trial. And I think they have a restaging of the trial each summer. So
at the college, I believe.
So if you'd like to get down there and see and participate in that.
Bryan College, named after William Jennings Bryan, who defended creationism. and they put on a good play down there
those poor
at that
people.
college. But they do a good job with the play.
Okay, so the trial brought to Tennessee great
notoriety, for one thing.
Shall we say notoriety. And unfortunately, the teaching of science was harmed as evolution was removed from the nation's textbooks for decades and did not recover until the space race started by the Soviet Sputnik. And I would say it still is not recovering because we have so much influence from creationists. So here in the 21st century, creationists whose ideas are unable to make convincing scientific case continue to choose legislatures as a way to inject their ideas.
I noticed one of the creationists who's been very outspoken has recently tried to combine creationism and evolution. That's of course, that's what my teachers did back in the 1950s, but he's come, it took him a quarter of a half
Let's
century to do
see.
that.
We had a phone call, and if we haven't been to...
let's see what go ahead, call in. I guess we're too late, shucks.
We waited too long.
Too late. Well, let's move on with the topic, and maybe they'll call right back.
Listener, please call back. We would love to hear from you.
Okay. Now, what is our topic?
Our topic... Oh, okay. Phone calls back. Here we go.
Chris. No.
Well, caller, what name shall we apply to you? How can we refer to you?
This is Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, go ahead, please.
Caller from Southern Ontario, Canada.
Oh, my goodness.
First of all, I'd like to put up a challenge to any religious people watching the show right now to come in and talk to me about religion. Glad to do it. Also, can science disprove God? Your notation for the day. I'm saying that science doesn't disprove anything, and they are not in the business of disproving anything. They have facts, they have studies, they have research, they report on the facts they see. it doesn't disprove anything.
Well,
as far as the Scopes Monkey trial, there was a very good movie called Inherit the Wind done about that, and a stage play.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a lot of things that are inaccurate. John Scopes went to a police station one day, spent about 15 minutes doing paperwork, and he was never in custody after that.
Yeah.
And the people in that Tennessee town welcomed the outsiders to come in because it was a hot summer day. They needed the money.
They needed the money, and they still do. They
still do.
Got a wonderful restaurant there, as a matter of fact.
Well, let me say, Jeffrey, although Jeff Frick.
R-I-C-K.
Okay, go ahead, Jonas.
Says, can science disprove God? I think that it is up to the adherents to prove the existence of God, and anything as outrageous in my mind as claiming the existence of such a God requires exceptional proof.
That's another topic, though, we're going to talk about.
Okay, let me read a couple of paragraphs, and then I want to get back to the
caller. Go ahead.
The caller. Okay. Today we begin a conversation about neurological and biological bases to explain some of the religious experience some people report. At this time, we will not discuss seemingly objective claims considered as miracles, which might fall under the category of supernatural or paranormal, though that might be an interesting topic for future shows. These events have been considered by miracles and so on by skeptics such as Michael Shermer, James Randi, the Amazing Randi.
The Amazing Randi.
And our co-host here, Joe Bornhart. Well, maybe he'll comment on that. But I wanted to say that the James Randi Educational Foundation has a standing offer of a prize for $1 million to anyone who can demonstrate evidence of a supernatural power under appropriate conditions. And certainly the existence of a God would be a supernatural power. And so if you want to make a quick $1 million, you come up with a proof for the existence of God.
Yeah, there's several. There's the ontological argument, the cosmological argument, and on and on. So,
no, anyhow, James Randi is not looking for an argument on that point. He's looking for actual facts, evidence.
Yeah, scientific approach to it. How do you test the theory?
Does it hold up under scrutiny? And the fact is that James Randi does not, and also guaranteed that he would not watch or observe or set the ground rules for the test.
I agree.
He's very clear about that.
Yeah. In fact, I worked with Randy once. We exposed a faith healer who later went to prison, not because we exposed him, because an insurance company exposed him too. We weren't interested in sending him to prison. We just wanted to show that what he was talking about was simply not even testable. He didn't have enough specific evidence to talk about it.
And in fact, as you explained to me, there was deceit.
Deceit. Now, this particular faith healer, in my opinion, was some faith healers, I think, really believe what they're doing, you see. And others, I think, are just out and out frauds. I think the one we dealt with was a crook. And, I mean, it was so obvious to me he was a crook. And I'm glad he's...
Well, here in Canada, that person would be charged with practicing medicine without a license. When these guys step up in front of the audience and say, throw your medicine away, that becomes practicing medicine without a license.
Well, they didn't even press
Denny
him for
and
that.
a few others would be in prison right here because they come to Toronto, they do their faith healing, but the one thing they do not say is, you true believers come forward and throw your medicine, your pills up on the desk. They can do that in the States, apparently.
You're right.
Could you guys explain to me the difference? Because here in Canada, they'd be in a nearest jail cell.
Well, we have some wacky legislators.
No, he's talking about the difference in the legislation. Well, you got a point too. But I'd rather have more leniency in that area than getting back to the notion that you arrest people for their religious views. And I think here I'd rather take the risk of having crackpots and lunatics on the street than locking up people just because you differ with their religions.
Well, I will say that when the Pope gets sick, they take him to the hospital.
Yeah, hospital. They don't take him to Oral Roberts or his son now, Earl Roberts. Yeah. I heard Oral Roberts' son once. He was in the middle of his speech, and he said, "Oh, I hear you, Lord." And my Baptist aunt was with me, and she said, "He's a phony." Even she knew he was a phony.
Oh.
Okay, but it's not a question of religion. It's a question of, are you practicing medicine without a license?
Well,
And in Ontario, they would hit him on that real hard.
Okay, I think when you do make outstanding physical claims and take money for it, I think you should be brought in for practicing medicine. I mean, you're a fraud at that point.
Yeah, and there are a number of cases where children have ended up dying of curable diseases.
Oh, yeah. Well, there have been, yeah.
Because the parents were listening to some fate healer.
Well, blood transfusion with Jehovah's Witnesses, that's one of the test cases in which they don't believe in blood transfusion. So, but most people in a particular religion know somewhere along the way you have to draw a line that's sensible. And so they put the religion here, and then in some other areas that's called compartmentalization. Most people do this anyhow in certain areas of their lives.
Okay, Jeffrey, we're going to
Well, I'm
move
aware
on.
of people who believe that sort of thing, but I'm not aware of any passage in the Bible that says do not do blood transfusions or do not rely on your physician. I'm not aware of any of it.
Yeah, their passage in the Bible's Leviticus, I think it's 17:11, but you can look it up. The life of the flesh is in the blood, and that's all they need. And probably they came from another background that says don't drink blood, and so they sort of got some notion, there was some mystical notion about blood. And you can understand that in antiquity, when there wasn't any real medicine, then they had enough knowledge to know that blood could carry diseases, and so I think that's part of the problem. And so they didn't come into the day of modern science. Jehovah's Witnesses were in the 19th century, and medicine was still.
Do you think someday in the future that the Jehovah's Witness could join the rest of us in the 21st?
Well, they do in most things. I don't like to isolate people to say because they're crazy in one area that they're crazy in other areas, because I know some atheists who are crazy in other areas, but I don't generalize. That's called the fallacy of generalization.
Oh, I brought in.
Yeah, I've run into a few of those too. But the thing is, you have to hold them accountable for the craziness they say, no matter how much rational things happen in the rest of their lives.
Whenever they make it applied in things, and I think your point in medicine, and make those kind of physical claims, and I think there is a grounds for prosecution. In fact, there's some cases right now that some pharmaceutical companies, I think maybe, have sort of fudged on the research because of the money background with all these pharmaceutical things.
Yeah.
That it may not be all they're supposed to be, and that scares me because at my age I have to be on some of these. Right now, I have to take a blood pressure medicine. I hope they're doing their good research. I'm certainly not appealing to.
Did you see 60 Minutes reports this Sunday? Because they were reporting on people your age and above, and they were saying high blood pressure is a good idea at your age, Joe Burkhart. Not my age. I'm 58.
At what age is high blood pressure?
Late 80s, 90s.
How about
at 100?
How about 100?
Because it sends the circulation of the blood through your system so much faster, while everything else in your body is moving slower, that it's actually good for you and it helps you live to be 95 to 100.
Well, how about 215?
You're going to be 215?
Yeah, blood pressure 215.
They didn't say exact numbers. They just said higher blood pressure was good for people over 85.
Oh, I want to know specifically.
Not good for people between 50 and 85, but really good for people over 85.
Okay, well, I'm 82.
This is from 60 Minutes. You can check the YouTube to rebroadcast that.
Good. That's good.
It's one of my favorite shows, 60 Minutes. I mean, I've been watching it for 40 years.
I'm with you.
More.
I hit blood pressure once at 215, but I'm 82. I don't like doctors telling me I'm real healthy for my age.
Yeah, that's you're alive at your age. Most people don't.
That's a good point. And I'm
You're
grateful.
breathing. That's a good idea at your age.
Yeah, I'm grateful to a lot of people who helped me.
Okay,
I'm going to get off the phone right now. I mean, I could talk to you guys forever. You know that.
I like your Canadian dialect.
Thank you very much. Talk to you later, gentlemen.
Thank you.
bye. I brought in a picture of
James Randi.
Yeah. And I just wanted to show it.
I got to tell the audience something about it. I was with him at a meeting because we were exposing this faith healer, and I was at the dinner table with him, and we were talking, and he's a very interesting guy. And so as we walked away, I went up to the cash register at the hotel there to pay my bill for the food we were eating. And he said, "Stop that man," to the cashier. And I stopped, and he came up and he pulled silverware and all kinds of stuff out of my pockets because he is a professional magician. So what did I say? Well, I didn't know what to say. I said, "Well, we just got him out." But he's really knowledgeable in this particular area of fakery, and so he can expose people that I couldn't because I don't know enough.
Yeah. Okay, continuing on, we said we weren't going to deal with things like miracles. Rather, we'll be considering personal subjective experiences claimed to reveal the presence of a God or other realms of existence
Angels
or reality.
And the like,
Our plan is to discuss these types of subjective experiences traditionally accepted as spiritual or religious. We will then discuss the evolution of the concepts of the mind, spirit, and soul, and finally discuss the evolving evidence how brain functions and how experiences can be understood as functions of the brain. Now, we won't get to that today because we have a phone call.
Okay, well, let's get and see what our phone call says.
Okay.
Go ahead, our guests, call in and tell us your name and what you have to say.
Hi, this is Charles from Central Illinois.
Central Illinois, go ahead.
Yeah, about today's topic. When they finally got access to the Holy Shroud of Turin, and they went through all their testing and so forth, they had their press conference, and one of the reporters got up and says, "Okay, how many of you think that this is in fact the Shroud of Jesus?" And none of them raised their hand. And then they went, "How many of you think this isn't the Shroud of Turin?" And none of them raised their hand. And the head of the project stood up and says, "As there are no valid methodological, naturalist, scientific tests for the supernatural or for Christness, that is a question we don't have any way of testing for, and therefore we don't have an answer for that."
Yeah,
that's one of the major problems with a lot of the so-called claims of supernaturalism. There's no way to test a lot of them.
Well, here's what's interesting to me. Having studied theology over the years, I went to theology school. One thing you can do is you can take their statements and compare with other statements for just ordinary consistency. And let me give you an example. Jesus became God. That's Orthodox Christianity. That's behind the Trinity theory. Okay,
right.
A sensible question is to ask a person, and the person you talk with is a sensible person. Even if he says this, you disagree with him. That doesn't mean you think he's an idiot. It means you disagree on a major point. And so you say, now, if Jesus was God, when he was 2.5, was he omniscient? Now that's a sensible question, and it's not something that you can do a scientific test on. But it's a kind of rational question you can ask. Did Jesus at the age of 2 say to his mother, "You don't need to teach me anymore because I know it all"? Or did he at the did he at the age of 1? Now most kids cannot speak a language at the age of 1, but if Jesus was omniscient, then
he should have spoken every language ever.
Exactly, because presumably God hears in every language and reads minds also. So those are the kinds of rational questions you can ask all day in theology. And I noticed in theology school, that's how people change their thinking, is they followed the arguments, and then they followed the other arguments, and they could see they didn't fit. I remember one of my teachers said, if Jesus became God, was at 4:30 in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time? And I thought that was a sensible question. Because there was the adoption theory that Jesus became God at his baptism, when John baptized.
John the Baptist. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or when he was openly acknowledged, or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I did see the program that the previous caller, Frederick, I think it is, was talking about. There's an ongoing study of people. They started it like 30 years ago, and they're doing continuous studies on people 85 and older, I think it is.
Yeah.
And they're finding some amazing discoveries, and you could probably find it somewhere on the internet.
On 85.
So, and he was talking about the higher blood pressure, not 215 over whatever.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
The higher blood pressure is better, in fact, for males and females, as well as romantic time with one significant other was another factor that seemed to help.
Well, my blood pressure got up to 213 one day, and that's why I went to the doctor. I didn't go to Oral Roberts' son. Although I could make a good case. In some cases, there are not alternative medicines, but supplementary things you can do. I mean, I think meditation, not any kind of spooky sense, but learning how to calm yourself down and how to operate in certain ways, in other words, overt physical behavior, that can help.
True biofeedback, not the woo-woo from New Age.
I gotcha. Right, yeah. Yeah, this is, and what feedback is in effect saying we're in an interactive world, and we get messages from our environment. And of course, you can turn it into technology and get a quicker feedback.
Yeah. Now, as for some of the things you were talking about earlier, while we can't test for some of these claims, we can examine what the claims are stating, like the Catholic miracle that supposedly happened in the 1930s, I think it was, in Mexico, where they had the sun dancing around in the sky madly, and where they had supposedly, thousands of people see it. Well, given that the sun was visible from Western Europe all the way to Hawaii at that point in time, you're talking like several, a minimum of 150 million people should have seen the same thing. That's like going to New York City and having one person claim that they saw the Statue of Liberty dance the cha-cha one day and declare it's absolutely 100% true, and the rest of the 8 million people in New York City, none of them ever saw it.
Yeah, that's
but you got to accept that one person's claim.
Yeah, that's why we talk about public testing. By the way, there was a group of Christians, I think at the turn of the century, B.B. Warfield and some of them up at Princeton, when Princeton was a fairly conservative seminary. They were worried about all the claims of miracles that Protestants and Catholics were proliferating at that time. And so they came up with a theory. Now, this is their theory, because you can see they were worried about this. And they concluded that the day of miracles had stopped in the first century with the apostolic age. And I guess the apostolic age, as far as I could figure out, stopped about 96 AD, somewhere around 2:30 in the afternoon. It's got to stop.
Amazing how precise they can be.
Okay, well, you can see their problem, and they realize if you have a religion with every Tom, Dick, and Harry coming up with miracles, then the value of miracles begins to deteriorate. It loses its value because they're just a dime a dozen. And so they said, well, this has got to stop. And they came up with a theological conclusion that
it had stopped.
It had stopped in the end of the first century. They didn't know at that time that maybe the prologue to the fourth gospel, the Gospel of John, was probably composed about 120 AD. Otherwise, they could have extended it a little longer, maybe.
Well, my favorite one so far is that how do they explain both the Catholic and the Protestant statements? Let's see, Thomas Aquinas, I think it was, making the statement that, St. Augustine.
Not Thomas Aquinas, but Augustine. Yeah, go.
Yeah, that diseases were caused by demons, and it was also accepted by Martin Luther.
That he was what by demons? I didn't get his word. What did he say?
Diseases were caused by demons, and it was foolish of medical doctors to think they could cure them.
Well, in those days, by the way, a very good book on this. This Zealot I'm talking about, and other books on that first century. We have to remember, medicine was not much at that time.
Well, there was Galen, but
compared to what we call medicine today,
there was not the disease theory, the germ theory.
The germ theory, and they had a lot. So what a lot of these so-called faith healers did in those days, I mean, they made distinction between magicians and faith healers they believed. And I think what they were often talking about was the placebo effect. I mean, that'd be worth investigating, and that's something worth that.
We're exploring now.
Yeah, you are.
But my question is if they have this divine, omniscient, divine being guiding their lives, how come he never mentioned viruses, germs, bacteria, and things of that nature?
Well, are you saying that Jesus did not have medical omniscience?
Or nor do I see the Holy Spirit showing it, nor none of the angels, nor none of the people with divine revelation from God. I don't recall any of them claiming
at that time
about that.
At that time, the atomic theory had just barely come into existence.
Yes, by the Greek philosophers who are trying to figure out how the world worked, and they came up with a concept of atom.
Yeah, it just means, it's the Greek word, means uncut. Tom,
uncuttable.
The little A in front of it, the Greek alpha, means uncut.
And that's the, was promptly disregarded, especially after the burning of the Library of Alexandria and all the rest of it, when the primary focus was not of this world, but of the next one.
Yeah. Well, they had no real good way of testing the atomic theory at that time. And, that was, I mean, as you said, it was the philosophers who came up with it.
It was a logical concept.
Yeah, Democritus came up with, as far as we know.
And then basically avoided infinite regression.
Infinite regression, yeah. In other words, they were saying something had to exist. And the composite, they knew enough to know that things seemed to come about by units coming together. They could see growing, seeds becoming trees. Yeah. And so they did the best they could, as we do too. I mean, we're still in the process of learning a lot. And 100 years from now, we'll be looked upon as somewhat ignorant 100 years from now.
Oh, yes. That's, which of course according to all the Christian theists I've encountered, it's probably not going to happen because of the second coming.
Now, most Christians that I know are different, apparently, from the Christians you know.
Well, they all keep saying the same thing. Jesus is going to return. You know, in the book of Revelations and all that. Some of them make stupid mistakes by saying, yes, he'll be here in a few months. And some of them say, well, he'll be here pretty soon. And you ask what pretty soon means is, well, it means pretty soon.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Now, Jesus, according to my Uncle Charlie, bless his heart, was going to come back somewhere about 1950 after the Antichrist set in. Now, I remember as a kid, that's during the, right after the Second World War. During the Second World War, my Uncle Charlie, who was very good in business, but he had started reading the book of Revelation, and he concluded that Mussolini was the Antichrist. Now, as I learned in seminary, there have been at least 100 different versions, including Adolf Hitler to the Pope, and on and on.
Several popes, a couple of presidents.
Mm-hmm. I remember one of my friends.
Martin Luther was supposed to be his left-hand man or something. Martin Luther King was supposed to be his left-hand man by some people's accounts, and all the rest of it. And it's given the complete and total failure rate, I think they'd be learned to give up by now.
Yeah, that's one of my teachers said, and right in the middle of the class, he gave a little history of how many falsifications had taken place, and he said, science and religion both ought to teach us humility. And I still remember that. And he meant by that, we've been wrong on so many things, all of us, on so many things. I'm 82, I've been wrong on a lot of things, that we ought to learn a little bit about our humility.
I'm just going 57, and I've been wrong so many times I've lost count. I'll let you guys go so we can have other callers and stuff.
Well, thank you very much. From middle Illinois.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Well, Joe, it's time for our program break.
Okay, do that, would you?
In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Community Access Television Channel 6 or Channel 12, depending on your cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
It's a call-in show, and we're live today. What is the date today? I don't know.
May 6th, I think.
And call in to the number that would be on your screen, and there's some more stuff here. It's small print. Let's see if I can call in now while we go in on informative break. Very small print.
Okay, Sam, could you play our videos now?
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
For those of you who might have tuned in late, need to remind you again or repeat that we have the upcoming public lecture, annual public lecture, sometimes more than one.
And it's a goal.
And we have Dr. Robert Price, Council for Secular Humanism, Center for Inquiry, and he will be speaking on ethics for humans by humans.
And it's 2 o'clock, what day?
2 o'clock on May 18th, Sunday, May 18th, 2 p.m. in the Goins Auditorium at Pellissippi State Community College on Hardin Valley Road.
Plenty of good parking place. So we'd be really pleased, and I think it'll be a very interesting topic. And mostly want to know how ethics got started. And he's good at it.
And I have a little clip a little thing that I copied from recent Scientific American that I want to talk about. Okay. So Robert Price is going to talk about ethics for humans by humans, and so we might ask the question: well, where do human ethics come from? And there is there's this recent article in by the Skeptic column by Michael Shermer, and he is talking about what appears to be the case, that babies have an innate sense of ethics, that just like
they know tit for tat.
Birds know how to build nests without being taught. It must be some evolutionary genetic kind of thing, though I can't imagine what kind of structure would be involved. But same thing seems to happen in babies. But you have to be careful, because you have to distinguish between what might be their innate capabilities and what may be taught by the culture. So you have to catch them early enough that.
Well, what part is the innate part?
Okay, here's an experiment. It says there's this guy named Bloom, and it says, in Bloom's laboratory, a 1-year-old baby watched puppets enact a morality play. One puppet rolled a ball to a second puppet, who passed the ball back. The first puppet then rolled the ball to a different puppet, who ran off with the ball. The baby was given a choice of taking a treat away from the nice puppet or the naughty one. As Bloom predicted, so we wonder about double-blind kind of experiments, the infant removed the treat from the naughty puppet, which is what most babies do in this experiment. But for this little moralist, removing a positive reinforcement, the treat, was not enough. The boy leaned over and smacked the puppet on the head. Bloom recounts in his moral mind, punishment was called for. And it goes on to say there are numerous permutations of this research paradigm, such as a puppet trying to roll a ball up a ramp for which another puppet either helps or hinders. Time and again, the moral sense of right, preferring helping puppets was and wrong, abjuring hurting puppets, emerges in people between 3 and 10 months of age. Far too early to attribute this to learning and culture. Well,
I got a conjecture on this. It's a conjecture.
Okay.
That humans and other animals too learn more or less to identify with another member of the species partly because in cooperative activity you get more pleasure. In other words, by identifying with another person, that's partly yourself. So to love your neighbor as yourself is partly loving yourself. Imagine living alone with nobody to talk to or relate to for the rest of your life. How's that? You know what you would do, don't you? You would start hallucinating. Your brain would generate all kinds of other people because I think genetically we are built to interact. But if you're going to interact, you can't afford to kill off each other. Yeah. You have to, in other words, there is a genetic need, I'd even put it in a need. If you're going to have an interaction, you need to respect somewhat, at least, the other individual.
Okay, Joe, you were going to show us some books that you...
Oh, yeah. Here's a book, I think, that is very, it's exceedingly interesting. This woman, Paula Fredrickson, spoke at the University of Tennessee 2 or 3 years ago. And this is one of her books, From Jesus to Christ. And it's a paperback, so you won't have to pay a lot of money, but it's a very rich book in that sense, and it's highly readable. And another book, unfortunately, the title is a kind of mixture of English and Latin and Greek. It's called Jesus Deus, but don't let that fool you. E-A-S-U-S, like the Greek word Jesus, and it's E-A-S-U-S Deus, and it's by M. David Litwa, L-I-T-W-A, and it's an exceedingly good book, because he shows how in the early first century you had all kinds of angelology and spirits, and they crowned emperors as kings and made them gods, and then you had gods all over the place. And so what they really had to do is start to control some of this, because otherwise just everybody along the road was a god, and so it didn't mean too much. So they tried to reserve it for kings and heroes among the Greeks. And then in Philippians chapter 2 in the New Testament, about to start there at the verse 5, trying to reserve it for Jesus. And then there's, of course, a lot of this book discusses this quite a bit. And another book I didn't bring by Bart Ehrman, How Jesus Became God, is an exceedingly well-written book, and I would encourage that. And then here's something, if you're a Protestant and a Baptist, in particular, is the Unfettered Word by some Southern Baptists. Robinson B. James is the editor, The Unfettered Word, and it's these ministers and preachers and mostly scholars too, trying to come to terms with the notion of the Bible and trying to be rational and yet hold on to their theory that it's divine revelation. None of them holds that the Bible's inerrant. And most of them are not anti-evolutionists, by the way. Go ahead. Okay,
now, we're down about the third paragraph of the first page here.
Go.
So I wanted to say we want to talk about religious experiences and how they may be understood as functions of the brain, and this being referred to as neurotheology. Now, I want to say that you and I, at least I'll speak for myself, do not claim a particular expertise in this matter. We will share with you what we think we have learned about the subject, and we will share our sources of knowledge so perhaps you can follow us on our journey. So, 2 video sources are lectures produced by the Teaching Company as their Great Courses series, and we saw one of those last Sunday. Okay, the first of these is Biology and Human Behavior, which is the one that was being shown. The Neurological Basis for Individuality by Professor Robert Sapolsky of Stanford University. We've been following these lectures at several of our meetings at the Rationalist of East Tennessee. The second video series is Understanding the Brain by Professor Jeanette Norden of Vanderbilt University. Then there are some other books. Neurotheology, Virtual Religion for the First Century by Lawrence McKinney. There is Principles of Neurotheology by Andrew Newberg. And then another with Newberg as joint author, The Mystical Mind with Eugene D'Aquila, and who I think was the a teacher of Newberg. Then there are Wikipedia articles on neurology, religious experience, vision quest, unconscious mind, the brain, New Age spirituality, shamanism, and many other topics. And so for what I have written here, I've borrowed heavily from these sources. And if you find this subject as fascinating as I, please visit our website at rationalist.org and join us when topics like this arise at RET meetings.
Discussion meetings. And yeah, that last meeting we had, I thought was very interesting.
Yeah. And there's still a bunch of lectures to go, and I kind of looked ahead, and the last lecture is on neurotheology. So neurotheology, also known as spiritual neuroscience, attempts to explain religious experience and behavior in neuroscientific terms. It is the study of correlation of neural phenomena with subjective experiences of spirituality and hypotheses to explain these phenomena. Proponents of neurotheology say there is a neurological and evolutionary basis for subjective experiences traditionally categorized as spiritual or religious. And as soon as we deal with the next call that's coming in, I want to talk about some of the experiences that are traditionally involved in or recognized as spiritual experiences.
Okay, good. Let's see what our caller's got. Hello, our caller. Speak to us.
How are you doing?
You're good and loud. We can't hear you.
My first question to you is, are you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
My first question is, I just wonder why you guys even care. Why do you concern yourself enough to? And I'm not trying to espouse any religion or anything. I'm just asking, what is your purpose? What is your point?
Yeah, that's a sensible question. First of all, most of us are humanists, and we grow up in a human environment that's very complex and complicated. And part of our interest in this is we try to understand our fellow human beings, including ourselves. Now, what's interesting to me is the more I understand more about one group, the more it helps me understand another group, even though they may differ. And that's why I like anthropology, because anthropologists study different groups and their beliefs, and it helps all of us to see that we're all trying to solve problems given the background that we come from, and then to see how people solve their problems given the circumstances they inherit. And that's where all of us are alike. We all inherit different backgrounds, but still we're trying to understand other backgrounds too.
So this is somewhere between a hobby. I guess you don't make money trying to figure that out, so it's more of a personal quest to...
Well, that's another good, sensible question. Right now I'm retired, but as you can see, I read all the time in this area. I was paid as a job to teach philosophy and also in the Department of Religion Studies. And so I taught the Apostle Paul, of course, on the Apostle Paul, the New Testament. I taught world religions, taught Plato.
So, just trying to interrupt you, but while you're mentioning Paul, so do you believe he really existed?
The Apostle Paul?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
Do you believe that God spoke to him, blinded him, and spoke to him and said, "Hey, stop killing these Christians and follow me"? Do you believe that? Do you think he was hallucinating?
I think all of us have hallucinations now and then, and I don't think Paul was an exception to this.
Oh, really?
What I do think, since you asked the question, I have been greatly influenced by the Apostle Paul's thinking over the years, beginning at least at the age of 16 or 17.
So if it was a hallucination, it was a good hallucination because he's noteworthy of what he says, and it's worthwhile, the philosophies that he espouses.
Put it this way. I noticed in my past, see, I'm 82, I've had some theories that I thought were mistaken, but not all aspects of my theory were mistaken. And that's the same with the Apostle Paul. I think some aspects of Paul's beliefs I don't share, but I see the way he's trying to solve certain problems. In fact, I wish our government system would learn, our penal system could learn more from the Apostle Paul. I can't go into that now.
I'm glad you said that, and because I know you guys are running out of time, and based on that last comment you made, you wish that our government would adhere to some of the better concepts and principles that he taught. You know, I approached my brother-in-law one time with this question. I said, and concerning our religion, and again, I'm not here to espouse a particular doctrine, but I said to him, I says, "You really believe it's true?" And his response to me was, he says, "Well, you know, if I die and it's not true, if I turn to dirt and that's the end of it," he says, "Was my life better because of this or worse?" And looking at his family, of course, they particularly don't drink, smoke. They're healthy. Their children have stayed away from drugs and alcohol. They have 4 children who all were.
I like that.
And so the ultimate answer, he says, "Well, what if it's not true? Was my life better because I adhered to these principles and chose to believe or have faith?" Nobody is going to say they know unless they've actually seen God, you know.
I know where you're coming from. So I deal more with specifics. Some parts of say, my background of Protestant Christianity is very sensible and makes a lot of sense, and I'm better off with it. Other parts I'm worse off with it, and I'm glad to be born again beyond it, if you understand my language there. I've moved beyond.
Just give me one example so I kind of know what you're talking about. Do you have one example of that?
Oh, I'll give you several examples. The notion of eternal damnation, we've talked about that on this program. It seems to me to have been invented by very evil minds worthy of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin.
Sure.
You with me?
You know what?
Go ahead.
I'm 100% in agreement with that.
You're the kind of Christian I can do business with.
People don't even consider me. I'm still not going to tell you what it is, but most Christian religions don't consider mine to be Christian, although it is very much so. And we absolutely do not believe in what you're talking about. We don't believe it's as clear cut as there's a hell and a heaven, and you make one mistake too many, you're going down, suffer for eternity. The other one, you're going to make it, and you're going to sit on. We don't adhere to that at all. We know that's not true. Paul even talks about different degrees, and I looked into the second heaven and so forth.
You brought up a very good point from what
we're running out of time. I need to ask one question. We forgot to ask your name or nickname or how we could refer to you.
Where are you from?
Mike.
Mike, okay. Mike, we have to
disappear. But call us another day. We're glad to hear from you. I really appreciate
this. And we look forward to talking to you again. So now I'll just say goodbye. Okay, it's time to start wrapping things up. If you want to contact us, get out your pen and paper and write some of this information down. This has been the Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am Jonas Haldeman.
And I'm Joe Barnhart, and we want to welcome you for our next meeting next Tuesday.
Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. Okay.